You're listening to The Secrets of Mastery, a series of conversations with artisans about what it takes to master their craft and what their journey has taught them. I'm Pauline Bartolone, and this is a production of Craftmanship magazine, a multimedia publication about artisans and innovators who are creating a world built to last. On this episode, we learn about a unique folk art in the American West called horsehair hitching. Hitching is basically the knotting of horsehair into complex patterns to make belts, necklaces, decorative walking sticks, and of course, accessories for horses. Shoni Maulding has been practicing this unusual craft for more than 30 years, and she's been known to spend 12 hours a day hitching horsehair. Shoni lives on the Flathead Indian Reservation, just north of Missoula, Montana, but her ancestry is Shoshone. She mostly taught herself this craft at her husband and creative partner Ron Maulding's suggestion. Ron saw it being done in prisons. He was a full-time hobby director at Montana State Prison, where inmates were, and still are, some of the only people making and selling this folk art. On this episode, we talked to Shoni about the craft's mysterious origins, about how she's found the patience to master this unique art form, and why a machine could never learn to hitch. Welcome to the show, Shoni.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Shoni, first, can you describe the craft of horsehair hitching? From what I understand, it involves kind of weaving together bunches of horsehair strands, essentially using tight knots to make intricate designs. How do you describe horsehair hitching as it compares to sewing or knitting or other decorative arts?
It's definitely a knotting system. People who weave like to think of it as weaving, but it's not weaving. There is a braided horsehair, which is totally different from hitched horsehair. Braiding is like braiding a little girl's hair. Hitched horsehair is a series of knots. The process is as follows. I take 10 black or 11 white horsehair tail, not the mane. The mane is too soft and too short. And I usually work with 27 to 29 inch long horsetail hair. So I twist those hairs into what's called a pull. Those pulls are knotted over nylon string, which is usually wound around a dowel. So I'm actually working with a tube. There's only two knots that do all the intricate designs with the hitched horsehair, and we call it the open hitch knot or the closed hitch knot. And it's just a matter of manipulating which one, and that's how you get the designs.
I'm curious about horsehair just as a material. Can you tell me about how delicate it is, how strong it may be, if there was anything that was surprising to you when you first started working with it?
Horsetail hair is very strong, especially when it's hitched. There's no way that you can break it. It can be cut, like with a knife, but you literally cannot break it. Even a pull, one single pull of that 10 or 11 tail hairs is very, very strong.
I wanted to ask you more about what you know about the origins of horsehair hitching, because you literally wrote two books about horsehair hitching. So what do you know about how long have people been doing it? Who were the first people to start doing it?
When I started hitching in the early 90s, the theory at that time was that it was the Moors who conquered Spain and that it kind of came from the Moors. But that really couldn't be verified anywhere because the history of who started hitching and how, it's very, very vague. During the Ottoman Empire, some of the people were using the method of hitched horsehair for these things called tugs that main people in battle would put outside their tent. But the history of that is very vague, and it's not practiced at all in Turkey. So there is a little bit of history about Old Mexico and hitching done there. The main history where it's really known is in the western United States, inside prisons done by inmates. So the history is so vague, it doesn't really go to any culture. Some people think it's done by Native Americans, that's the history, but it isn't that. But the primary place that you find hitched horsehair is from the old prisons, even the territorial prisons. Charlie Russell would even write about it in some of his books about how basically a guy rustled a horse and ended up twisting hairs at Deer Lodge, meaning that he was hitching horsehair or braiding horsehair in the prison there.
Wow. Yeah, tell me what you know. I find it fascinating that this art form is practiced in prisons today. What do you know about how long it's been done in prisons, and which prisons do they do this craft?
For sure at Montana State Prison, and then also in Rawlins, Wyoming. There was a prison in Colorado. I'm not sure exactly what it was called. Walla Walla, Washington. Yuma, Arizona, and also Florence, Arizona. Those are the main prisons. It could have been done in other prisons, at a minimal amount. A lot of times the inmates, if they get out and then reoffend, they end up in a different prison. So the inmate that maybe learned, say, at Deer Lodge could end up in Rawlins, Wyoming. So it can be passed from prison to prison by the inmates who were incarcerated in different prisons.
That's so interesting. I wonder why prisoners have picked up this craft. I mean, does it have anything to do with the time that they have to spend in prison?
Yeah, exactly. The hobby craft programs in prisons, and there is usually like leather work, beading, a lot of different kinds of hobby craft, and it's exactly that because people have time on their hands. One thing that has really helped with the hobby craft is the inmates get paid for it. When they make it, usually at the prisons I'm familiar with, it has to be sent out immediately as soon as it's finished. But some of these prisons also have counters or little stores where they can sell their work out of, whether it's crocheting or knitting or some of the things that we think of as more Western type crafts. And so the inmates get a little bit of money for it. And sometimes, as with the hitched horsehair, they get paid more for, say, a belt than they would for working in the kitchen or the infirmary, the different places that are jobs for inmates. And then, there aren't enough jobs always in a prison for every inmate. So being able to sell the hobby craft or sending it out to friends and family who can sell it on the outside. So it is a form of income.
People may wonder, I mentioned that you live on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana. They may wonder whether this is a craft of Native Americans or Native people in the United States. What do you know about that?
I do know that all races of people that I know of have hitched. It's mostly been, I'm not politically correct, the white people and the Indians. Those are primarily the people that are known more for the hitched horsehair. But as far as a history of that being with the Indians, I'm not seeing that in any of the research, and there is very little research on this. But if you're on an Indian reservation, many people know what hitched horsehair is.
Oh, interesting. Okay. It's just not something that has been done in their community for a long time.
It's so time intensive that it usually is not one of the hobby crafts that's continued after an inmate returns out of a prison. And an inmate may teach like a family member or a friend on a reservation when they do get out, but it is very time intensive. And then trying to find the hair and that kind of thing, and then finding a market for it. for the amount of time that you've actually put into doing like a hitched belt. There's a lot of other jobs and hobby crafts out there that pay better than the hitched horsehair.
Well, you had mentioned that, horsehair hitching takes a long time, and you can spend 4 to 6 weeks on one project making a belt, and many hours a day. How many hours a day would you say you would spend on the hitching? 8 hours or more?
A lot of times I'd spend more. Maybe I'd spend like at least 10, maybe 12. When Ron was working and he had commuting time, I'd maybe start like around 9:30 and sometimes just go until like 9:30 that night when he got back home. But you have to take breaks. There's no way you can sit and just continuously hitch. So maybe I'd do 15, 20-minute breaks maybe every hour, and then, of course, lunch, supper. It's just a matter of like sitting. That's not good for anybody to sit for a really long time. And in that amount of time, if I did 3 inches that day, it was like, that was huge. Bells and whistles go off because 3 inches, given the intricate patterns that I was doing, was huge.
Well, I mean, that's a lot of time, 10, 12 hours a day, even with breaks, 4 to 6 weeks on a project. What gives you the patience to continue on to finish the project?
Well, that's a good question. I've learned that you can learn patience because I'm not a very patient person. But with hitched horsehair, I can be very patient. It's just so amazing that such an amazing art form can be made from such a simple product of horsetail hair. So sometimes I just keep going because I want to see what's going to happen in that next half an inch. And I use graph paper for all of my patterns. And so using the graph paper makes a lot more intricate patterns. And this paper can maybe be 4 feet long. So to be able to transfer something that's on paper just colored in with pencils into something that's maybe only 1 3/8 inches wide when it's finished, it is just incredible.
Yeah, it's very visual. You must be a very visual person. I mean, you told me that you don't do anything for entertainment while you hitch horsehair. Like, you don't listen to music or listen to podcasts. And some people may find that surprising given the number of hours it takes to finish a project. I mean, can you kind of describe the scene of you hitching horsehair at home, like how you stay entertained?
I think it's just the process. I've never thought about it as being entertainment before, but I think that the process of hitching is the entertainment.
Well, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the products that you make, the belts, the various accessories for horses, the bridles, who are your clients who buy your materials?
At first I would have thought that it would be the ranchers, the cowboys. It's not, for our experience. So I can only speak to our experience. It's people that see it as an art form and they buy it because of that. They don't buy it because they're necessarily in the agricultural world or in the Western world. They see it as an art form.
So not necessarily people who live in the West, like all over the United States, they may buy it?
Yes, yeah. Cowboys don't buy it. Most cowboys that are working cowboys, they don't have the money to buy it, and they don't want to do it because they know how time-intensive it is. They're out and doing their cattle work.
Well, do you mind if we talk a little bit about economics? I mean, we've talked about the hours that you put in, 4 to 6 weeks on a project. Does this make sense economically for you? Is this a good living for you, or is this kind of a labor of love because you just love the craft?
It's a good supplement income, but as far as doing it and doing it full-time and expecting to pay all the bills and health insurance and say if that person had a house mortgage and all of that, no, it would not be a livable income. And a lot of it gets back to just educating people because people don't understand why it's expensive because they don't understand the process and how long it takes.
So you've been doing it for over 30 years. Why do you continue doing it, if not for economic reasons?
It's the fascination with the horsehair. It just gets back to that and what you can accomplish with it. And then there are so few people that hitch horsehair that aren't in prison. So for people like to even find us and then to want a product, the last 10 years it's been really nice to work with people that, especially like there was a guy in Tucson whose horse had died, and he was so grateful when he saw his belt. And then sometimes we'll send pictures of the process also so they can understand a little bit of that. We've made friendships over the years with some of these people. I think it's because they're grateful, and then when we get to make an art form. We get pretty excited when we think of a new project and the different things that we can incorporate. Get your mind going.
You've been doing this for longer than 30 years. I mean, what does it take to become a master at a craft like that?
I would not be able to call myself a master because I think that's in the arrogant stage. So when people go around saying, oh, I'm a master hitched horsehair person, it's like, oh, so you're calling yourself that. When did that happen? So many people call somebody else master, and then, whether it's in the knitting world, it just as an aside, up in Canada, to be in that category, say a master knitter or master at crocheting or the different fiber arts, and you have to do a 2-year program with 5 very specific points, and you have to pass. You're judged on each of those 5 points before you can call yourself a master knitter. Well, there's no such thing in this whole hitched horsehair world where I have to pass like 5 different things in 2 years to be called that.
So there's kind of like no definition. I mean, to be doing it as long as you have, and to do the level of intricate designs that you were doing, I mean, what does it take? Does it take patience? Does it take visual sensibility? Does it take ingenuity?
It takes time, and then also the things that you just mentioned. It takes time. I could have been doing this for 32 years, but maybe make 1 belt a year. Now, would that make me a master, or would it make me as good as what I am, what I can produce? The answer would be no, versus maybe somebody in 5 or 10 years, if they were just very intense at it and worked at it, they could be in that category. I hate to say this, but there's so many variables with that also.
In an era where things are increasingly made by machine, what would you say to someone who says, why not program a machine to hitch horsehair? Would anything be lost if that were to happen?
Yes, a lot of things would be lost, but knowing the process, I think it would be very difficult to program a machine to do it. Plus, it gets back to educating the public about the whole process of the hitching. And yes, maybe, if somebody could figure it out, would it be lucrative for them to even do it with a machine? I don't even see how it could be done by a machine, actually, because of the process.
The dexterity that's needed, or like the maneuvering or the detail?
Working with the lengths of the poles, when I said that I could only go about 4 to 5 inches with one pole, there's so many variables with that. And then would people even want to buy it? I know there are fiber pieces that are machine woven that look like horsehair, and of course that's a lot cheaper. But that's the real diehards, the people that really look at it as an art form. They're not going to buy that woven fiber thing to pretend that it's hitched horsehair. They want the real thing. I don't know if it could be done by machine, and then if it would even sell after that.
Well, Shoni Maulding, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
And that's it for this edition of The Secrets of Mastery. You can check out Shoni Maulding's work on her website, hitchedhorsehair.com. That's hitchedhorsehair.com. You can buy one of her books there too, Hitched Horsehair, The Complete Guide for Self-Learning. Music in this series is from Blue Dot Sessions. For more Secrets of Mastery episodes or more stories about craft, check out Craftmanship.net. That's Craftmanship.net. You can find us on Substack too. Thanks for listening.